Hello, everyone. I am Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspired podcast. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and watch all the other ones which are listed on spiritualinspired.ca. My guest today is Rebecca Davidson. She comes to us from New Zealand. Rebecca is an energetic alignment coach, an intuitive guide, and a spiritual mentor. She is founder of the Intuitive Life Academy, the premium learning establishment to help you open your heart to love and your soul to the infinite power you really are. An international speaker, writer, and mentor, she has empowered thousands of people to break free from their limitations, to live a life deep down they know is possible, one filled with opportunities, fulfillment, and pleasure. She has her own podcast named Intuitive Abundance, and she has been published in Brainz magazine, Style magazine, and the Beauty book. Rebecca, thank you for taking the time to join me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be here.
And I would like to start asking you if you ever been a coach or in a previous life you were something else trying to find your purpose.
Oh, I could speak to that all day. I used to be a banker. I used to work in banking, and I worked in banking for 13 years. And I think I was attracted to banking because it was part of my purpose eventually to help people with abundance and money blocks and things like that, and their emotions in relationship to money. But I think I was drawn to that for the security and to learn how that world worked, to discover that it wasn't for me. And I think we all know what it's like to be in situations. And I think this is reflected mostly through the work that we do. Like, am I in the right place? Is this a good use of my time? Is this really what I came onto the planet to do? And I used to work in an office. For 5 of those years, I worked in private bank, which was for high net worth clients. And that was really fascinating because I started learning a lot about money psychology from that kind of more 3D rational world point of view. And that was really fascinating. I found it really interesting that I was learning really quickly that people were really identifying their self-worth with how much money that they had in their bank account. I remember one time I had to tell a gentleman that his application for a home loan had been turned down, and I felt like I crushed his spirit. It was a really horrible experience. So, with these experiences, even though I was learning really interesting things, which were part of my purpose further on down the track, that discomfort of knowing that you're not in the right place and you're not feeling fulfilled, that can actually be really scary. And I'm sure you've had similar experiences where you're like, I feel like I'm the square peg in a round hole and it just doesn't fit, and you know it, but you don't necessarily know what the next step is. So I had to go through that process myself of really starting to lean into my intuition and be guided by something outside of me, really, in terms of what's inside of me. But it felt more external at that point because it was like, what do I do? Right? As opposed to who am I being, which I learned about later on. But yeah, that's a really, really scary time. And I have so much compassion for my younger self, to look back and go how the ego was in full force and the fear was just enormous and the sense of discomfort. But of course, we need that to be able to move and to
Indeed.
start. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've tried so many things in my life that if I have to list all of them and tell someone about all these trials, they might not believe me because at one point I was doing 2 or 3 things in parallel. And it was kind of an inhumane from an energy perspective and effort perspective. But I was able to pull through just looking for that purpose and for the end goal. It didn't pan out as I hoped it would, but at least I have the experience and I know that I don't have to go back to that situation because I've been there, did that, and it enriched my life experience.
Yes. And also, too, I think those experiences really help you to see very clearly how much you are being led by your mind. Like when I started developing my intuition while I was in the banking industry, I felt like I couldn't tell anybody. I felt like it was a big secret because I felt like people would judge it, shame me, that they would think that I was a weirdo or that I was cuckoo because they were all living in that rational mind construct of logic and we have to rationalize it. And of course, here I am on the other side, but going, but what about energy? What about frequency? What about vibration? And you're quite right. Those situations where you feel like this is inhumane because the mind is like got you on that little treadmill going round and round, and you know it's taking you nowhere, right? Really, because the mind's obsessed often with the next goal and getting there. And then when I get there, I'll be happy. And it's quite a shift to jump off that and go, my happiness is here now. Yeah, quite a revolution.
Yes, and the jobs are today are done in such a way that they are taking a toll on our bodies, on our energies. So when one gets home, he or she doesn't have anything left in the tank, to do an outdoor, let's say, walk or a different type of activity that will enrich their life, and they will leave everything for the weekend mainly, or potentially. And if they have kids, in fact, on the weekend they'll have to take care of the kids, to take them to activities. So there is nothing left for them to take care of themselves.
Yes. And when I was in that circumstance, the thing that I was reaching for was alcohol. Because I had such a head-based job, my treat, so to speak, when I got home to relax and get out of my head was to drink alcohol. And of course, that was just making situations worse until I got to a point. I remember I actually had a conversation with my mom on the phone, and I was bawling my eyes out because I was just so lost and so stuck, and something needed to shift. And I said to my mom, and I still remember this moment really clearly because it's like the universe heard me and it all started shifting. And I said to mum, I want to live a big life. And it's about 2 weeks later from that, somebody sent me a link to a website and it was all about gratitude. And that was really the first part of my journey. And I was so depressed at that time, Claudio. I was like walking to work and I was saying things to myself like, I'm grateful that I have arms and legs just to get my attention in the right place, right? I'm grateful that I can actually walk to work. And I felt like I was really scratching the bottom of the barrel, but it was just to be able to start shifting because from the outside perspective, from the rational 3D world, it looked like I had it made. Right? I had this great job. It paid well. It was it was kind of an exclusive type of job. I drove this beautiful flash Italian car. I had my own home. I had a great group of friends, but my personal romantic relationships were miserable. And I felt so alone and so isolated and so stuck. And I was petrified because I knew what I was doing wasn't my purpose. And it was making a lot of things around me wrong, like the bank, other people, my boss, how it goes. And realizing this comes back to me. I'm not a victim. I get to choose. I get to make another choice. And that's when I started learning about intuition and energy and vibration and spirit and leaning into those things and starting to go, holy cow, right? This is my salvation, really, in terms of my soul and my soul expansion. And, the part of us that beats our own heart, starting to listen to that rather than my own mind. And throughout my work, I've been a coach for 10 years, and more and more and more, it becomes, I'm sure you will have noticed this, it becomes more and more simple, right? It's like we're either in love or in fear. We're either in our mind or in our soul. And I think people are really starting to realize that we often try and do spirituality through our mind. And we're really getting to that place where to shift the frequency, we just need to learn to stay in the soul-based frequencies and operate from there. And I know a lot of times when people hear that, they think, or what's my head going to do? Right? Because the head doesn't want to lose control, because also we've been conditioned that way. You know, the education system supports it in terms of like, okay, you have to use your intellect, you know, read, write, be focused up here. And often when you go out there energetically, people are just in their heads. So to even learn how to come into the body, or to be into the heart space, or to relax into trusting that life really does have you and that you are being taken care of, like that is such a wild concept for people, because if you're trying to do that from the mind, it's going to feel difficult. It's going to feel like you need to work at it. It's going to feel like, how do I trust the universe, right? And then we're up here still thinking about it, but that's not the same frequency as being in the soul self and relaxing into the truth of who we are and operating from that and creating from that. And of course, if you're looking at it, even scientifically, I mean, I haven't measured it, but I'm sure, because you can feel the difference in frequency, that your frequency from your level of mind will be less than your frequency from your true essence. I've always said to people, you know, your mind is the least powerful part of yourself. You know, you have your subconscious, which is often driving all your decisions. It's full of all your imprinting. But then, of course, you have your soul, which holds the energy of all the solutions. So it's like, where are you going to look? To the mind, to the subconscious, or just to the soul-based frequencies? I think people are really starting to understand that it's less thinking required. It's more, who am I being in this moment? And harnessing the power of the present moment. You know, as a spiritual teacher, I've taught people how to go into their Akashic records, which is fascinating and it's interesting, but it's often still of the mind, because the soul knows all that information. It knows all the past lives that you've had, but it's also an acceptance of all of them. It's us as humans that might go into a past life and go, oh, wow, I was actually the perpetrator in that past life. Right? And that, you know, like I was the one who was hurting other people, which can be beneficial from the level of mind as a humbling experience to go, okay, that would give me more compassion in this lifetime for other people that I see hurting people in this lifetime. But from the level of soul, the soul is an acceptance of all of it. Past life where you were the perpetrator, this life where you're endeavoring to bring more light onto the planet, and also in relationship to other people. So grounding heaven on earth, which is what, of course, we're doing as light workers, it really comes back to the relationship that you're having with yourself. But are we doing that through the mind, or are we doing it from soul-based frequencies?
Yes, and I often talk to my guests about the concept of letting go and live from the heart, and that's very hard to do. As you said, we are identifying ourselves with our job, our car, our house, our friends, our feelings, and unless we switch this concept into our mind, will be very hard to move forward and let go completely, trust the universe, trust God, the divinity, and have a smoother life path.
Yes. And, you know, because in essence, it really comes down to, do I trust who I really am? You know, we know that we are essentially God in a body. Do I trust that aspect of myself? And what is my relationship like with that aspect of self? And recognizing how, and again, I appreciate when people are listening to this, I can appreciate that everybody's going to have a different level of awareness. And it's a good thing that suffering, if it's present in your life, is there, because it's just showing you. And the one thing I'd really love to offer people is, like, if there's something in your life does not feel good, it's an invitation. right? It's an invitation. Don't allow your mind to kind of go into making it wrong or adding more kind of negative energy to it. See it as an invitation. I'm being invited into something else. I'm being invited into not suffering anymore. I'm being invited into letting go of the attachment that I have to my job or all the labels that are on me, like mother, father, child, cousin, workmate, boss, etc. Because those things aren't who you really are. And when we even start talking about this, there's part of you that knows this is true.
Yes.
We're the observer, right? The way we are is the one that's just watching the experience. Now, an analogy that I love to share because it was really helpful for me was one time when somebody said to me, you're like, your thoughts are like cars that are driving past a window, and your mind is like a little dog looking through the window at the cars. Right? If the dog gets out of the house and it runs into traffic, it's going to get run over. And this is what we do, right? We identify with our thoughts. We think that our thoughts are who we are. So to just create a little bit of space and to be the observer, like the dog watching the cars go by, to just go, oh, that's a thought, but it's not who I am. That's another thought. And I've also used the other analogy of Lassie, how like you're just minding your own business and your mind can hijack you. And before you know it, it's just gone boing, 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 like jumped over all these fences. And you're like, whoa, right?
Yes.
But even from that space, you're operating from the mind. So you can call the mind back, but the invitation is still to drop into soul-based frequencies and to operate from that place. Because of course, your soul, there is no right or wrong. The
Yes.
solution is already present before you ask the question, right? There is no judgment. There is no fear. There is no, I have to think about this before I move. So learning how to cultivate inside of the self, I really feel like people are realizing this is what we came for. This is what we came to experience as my true nature, and to have the courage to pack up where you're living in the mind and leave, essentially take your suitcase and permanently leave and go and live from the soul. And even learn how to create from soul-based frequencies. Because when you're doing that, whatever it is that you're wanting to create in your life, you understand it's already here. And then the work as a human, because we have to deal with time and space as a human having this experience on this planet, the work is not thinking about it or planning it or mulling it over. The work then becomes, what does it take to be the energetic frequency that is a match to this?
Yes.
That's the work, which is really the energy of self-belief and conviction in your true self. But it's way easier to do that from the soul than it is from the mind, because you can feel the difference in frequency. Mind loves to create problems. It's the cause of all your stress. In fact, it's probably the cause of all your suffering, because it's making projections all the time. It's deciding that's right and that's wrong, or this is good and this is bad, or, the ego reflex, fear-based frequencies, creating separation all the time. It makes us miserable.
Yes.
So learning really what it takes to come and live into the soul, that's what I'm doing as an energetic alignment coach, right? That's what I help people to do. And it's wild, but it's also amazing, because people essentially, I don't know if you felt this, Claudiu, where you've been in circumstances where you've been litmus testing your reality and things somehow just haven't felt like they're in the correct place. You know that feeling where you're just like, this is good, but it just still doesn't feel like it's quite in the right spot. Right? And that's often, again, where we're operating from the mind and we know it. But when we start living from the soul, we're like, oh, yes, right? This is the relief, the freedom, the love, the bliss frequencies that I chose to experience. in my soul contract, right? I've arrived, so to speak. And we already have arrived, right? But it's going to be so much easier to access the frequencies that you want to experience through your physical form, through soul self, rather than through the mind. And learning how to do that. I mean, it's the work of a lifetime, really, because it's you moment to moment to moment. Who am I being? Where am I coming from? Am I coming from my mind, or am I coming from my soul?
Yes, and is that
Yeah.
say that when people have reached the financial peak, they will say, "I have arrived," but most of the people have arrived financially, but not spiritually. So that's why the work is still ongoing, and they have now to allocate the time to themselves now that they have the money, and hopefully they are still in good health. They can have the means now to go into the spiritual direction.
Yeah. And that's one thing I learned in private banking is that because I know a lot of millionaires myself on paper, right? That when they were creating their wealth, they were, they're starting to almost have like an identity crisis, because what was happening is they'd worked so hard, again, from the 3D rational world, to get to this place where they could go, oh, I'm successful. And then they get there and it's hollow, it's empty. I remember manifesting like quite a large amount of money. It was like $75,000. And I thought it was going to make me happy. And it did for about 5 minutes. And then I was like, oh my God, because my ego, right, was so attached to my happiness is in the money. And it was such an amazing gift, really, from the universe in so many different ways, because it was like the universe saying, your happiness is not in the money, because money doesn't have any power to give that to you. It is literally a piece of paper that you are projecting meaning onto. So to come back to your happiness is not in the externals, even. It's not in the reality that you're creating through what you're seeing. It's in you. And the power is in you. And, I've always known that. I think we all do instinctively know that it's not out there. But we are trained a lot of the time to get caught up into that race of materialism or consumerism. And how disturbing it was to see these people in private bank who had a lot of money, but they were still desperately unfulfilled, and how frightening that could be for them, because they were coming up with questions like, oh, who am I? Or what do I do now? And the truth is, you can both have fulfillment and money. And the irony is, the more you lean back into your true soul essence, the more you will create abundance, because it's the truth of who you are that has a higher frequency. When you're emitting that frequency, you're just the energy of abundance. And I know this is a concept, and I've talked about this a lot with clients before, about when you're asking from your soul, when you have a desire and you're asking from your soul, it's almost like the question doesn't even get answered, because it's answered before you've even asked it, right? Before you've finished the sentence of asking for what you desire, it's already there, right? Because your soul self holds the energy of all the solutions. This is why when people start living from the soul, they're like, oh my goodness, this feels like a holiday. It's like, hallelujah, right? Thank goodness. Like, this is what I came to experience, these feelings of just like everything's taken care of, nothing's wrong, I'm safe, I'm free, all those sensations that we wish to experience. And then, ironically, massive abundance just becomes a side product or a byproduct of who you're being. But the focus is on yourself as the creator, not needing the money to prove something to yourself or other people, not needing money in your bank account to validate your self-esteem, and knowing the difference, right? Am I in my ego right now, which is fear-based frequencies, right? And a lot of people say, oh, you need your ego, or it's good to have some ego. The ego is fear-based. that is not of God, right? Fear is not of God. There's no fear frequencies in source energy. So you don't need to kill it, right? But it just melts away when you're living from the truth of who you are. You don't even need to figure it out or manage it. It just dissolves when you're coming from the truth of who you are. And I'm sure you've seen this yourself, where you see how much people project onto their reality, right? They'll make a comment and you'll just see it. You'll be like, oh yeah, they're projecting their belief system onto their reality. And even being aware of that, right? Starting, if you're working with your ego, to start going, what am I making true? And is it actually true? And I know this can be, I wrote a post the other day about how often I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about, a lot of the subjects where there's a sense of injustice, because most people are focusing on the problem rather than the solution, right? They're causing separation by going, this person's right and this person's wrong, or this person's the villain and this person's the victim. They're not actually talking about what's the solution to that. And the solution comes from us, of course, and learning how to embody these soul frequencies and be that. Because as you know from soul-based frequencies, it's total acceptance. That's just love. And if we can be that, then that's how we solve the problems on the planet. But it comes back to personal responsibility. And I think a lot of times, people feel guilty that they're not doing something, but you have a moment-to-moment opportunity to be the truth of who you are. So again, often I look at that and I think the invitation here is for me as an individual to look at who am I being in relationship to what is happening. Yes. I really do feel like that's the option, right, to world peace.
Yeah. And this image came to my mind when you mentioned about love and what's the solution, and who is, let's say, causing the grief, is if we bath these politicians in so much love that they will shrink and wither and they will just disappear by themselves because they cannot take it. They don't know how to embrace the love and the empathy. So this indeed could be the worldwide solution, a peaceful solution. So we'll have them gone for good.
Yes, or that they just shift into their true essence, right? That we're holding the frequency to melt their ego. So they're, instead of making them wrong, we're inviting them into more love. Like we're holding the invitation so strongly, like we're focusing on that. Like there is nothing else but you being invited into the truth of who you are, and that shifting the frequency. And of course, we know that that's happening already, like in terms of grounding in new earth frequencies. There are a lot of light workers who are working behind the scenes, holding the frequency of this, holding the frequency of this, holding the frequency of this. But the best thing that we can do as an individual is move beyond our own ego, because of course the ego loves to continue that separation. And I'm sure you know all this already. It's so important to be 100% responsible for the light that you bring.
Yes. Rebecca, going back to your coaching, I know you are very strong on 3 pillars. Own your worth, know where you are going, and express true self. Would you like to expand a little bit on each of them, please? Because I think they are indeed very important.
Yes. One of the things that like operating from the mind, it's always quite fascinating how people are so orientated towards not being good enough, right? I'm sure you've seen this before. Again, it's kind of like the common denominator. I'm not good enough. So one of the things that I'll often get clients to do is I'll say to them, tell me what's amazing about you. And sometimes it's literally like seeing them trying to create a new neuro pathway in their brain, right? And again, we are doing this from the level of mind, but in terms of focus, it's a good choice to look at what is amazing about you, so you can actually start naturally shifting yourself more towards the frequencies of knowing that you're loved and complete and whole just as you are, to get the mind on board to say, it's not all negative, right? Like, I do have these positive qualities, but maybe I haven't activated them. So we are doing it from the level of mind, because your soul already knows this stuff. Your soul knows how loved you are. Your soul knows that you have these unique gifts and skills. Your soul appreciates that. It's all contained within that energy. So starting to shift ourselves through the level of mind more towards soul-based frequencies. But then to be the person who really is embodying all of this, so we can be somebody who moves from the mind, right? Like, okay, we're going to, especially if you've been living there for like 20, 30, 50 years, like getting yourself ready to, pack this all up and move away really comes back to, who am I being? Who am I choosing to be? And what does it take to be the person who really starts operating from my true self? Like, one of the things, of course, with intuition is we talk a lot about authenticity, right? Speaking your truth. And to be the person who expresses that, because another aspect of working with that, when people come and see me, often they're hiding. And where there is hiding energy, right? Entrepreneurs going, oh, I want to put myself out there, but I feel like a fraud, or I feel like an imposter, or I feel like nobody's got to, they're not going to listen to what I have to say, or there's a million people out there saying the same thing. And it's like, but you're a unique soul signature, right? You're a unique expression of the divine. It's like you have your own unique harmony. So to express that, to go, yes, these have been my experiences and they're all valid because they're contributing to my awareness and remembrance of who I am, but to really drop in and go, what is amazing about me? So I can start expressing that and knowing how the law of correspondence works as well, which is really who you're being on the inside is going to be reflected in the external. And this is so important, right? Your relationship with yourself is everything. So to be the person who's picking up these things, to be able to go, let's get ready, right? To make it comfortable for you to let go of the mind and move into your soul self. Because from your soul self, it's easy just to open your mouth and speak, right? Because there's no right or wrong. There's no part of your brain going, oh, are they going to like that? Are they not going to like that? Am I saying the right thing? Am I going to be loved? Are they going to judge me? You're just saying it. And also, too, I guess it's the work really of becoming a clear channel, right? That is helpful, right? From the mind to clear things out so it's easier. Like if you were moving, you would probably go through your home and declutter. You're not always going to take everything with you, are you? You're going to go, this is a great opportunity to get rid of all that junk that I've been holding in the garage for years. So to be the person who's like, okay, let's do this, right? Like, let's clear up the mind by owning your worth and being the person who's going to declutter and then get ready to go and live in a completely different location. And that does take some work, right? Because the mind likes to be in control. A lot of people I work with, a lot of entrepreneurs, are micromanaging the universe. Right? What does it take to let go and trust? That's why I also love working with masculine and feminine energies, because it's also the energy of giving and receiving. So it can show you so much, not just in relationship to how you're relating to yourself, how you're relating to your partner, but also how you're relating to giving and receiving. Are you allowing yourself to be given to, which of course comes into your abundance, or are you overgiving? Working with a lot of female entrepreneurs, I see a lot of women going into masculine energy, and then they wonder why they're not receiving the feelings they want to experience or the money they wish to create. Because in there, they're operating from the mind and they're in give, masculine energy. Give. I'll go and do all the things, especially if they have children and a family, because often people don't realize that as a mother, you're also in masculine energy. which is why it can be tricky in relationships, because the woman's giving to the child all the time. And then, like, if it's a male-female relationship, the guy can be like, oh, you're not open and receptive to me. And that's because often her feminine energy has left the building. She's like, I don't even have time to be able to be still, to allow you to give to me, because I'm so focused on giving to this child to make sure it survives and grows and is healthy and feels loved, etc. So being, self-awareness is everything, isn't it? And there's so much that we can experience by just being willing to go inwards and to journey inside of ourselves and see what's there and love it, no matter what it is. I'm not really a big advocate, and I used to be, but not so much anymore, in terms of having to tap into the subconscious and go and figure out all those things. Your soul knows it all, and it's all taken care of. It's more about your relationship with the present moment and your relationship with power. I see a lot of people get tripped up on that. They are denying to themselves how powerful they are, and they don't know how to operate from that place. Now, when I say power, the mind can have a story about that. Right? It can be like, ooh, don't like that word. But I'm talking about spiritual power, true power, the true essence, right? Like, it is the most powerful frequency in the universe. So, and what's beautiful about it, right, is the more that you create intimacy with this truth aspect of self, the more relaxed you're going to feel. The more you're going to know that you are guided. You don't have to kick and flail anymore. You just get to flow. Still movement in that, right?
Yes, and I like the way you listed these pillars, because they go in a natural progression. You really have to know what you're worth before you know where you are going and before expressing yourself. So even if you want to jump to the last one, you still have to go back and go through these stages, because you have to portray yourself at your real value. So that's a good progression, the way you listed. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. And the universe is, like, the curriculum is always in front of you, isn't it? And have you noticed that about the universe? Like, it won't let you off the hook. It just won't let you off the hook. It will keep on bringing the pattern or the dynamic in a different form, in a different way, until you have got it, right? Like, you could see it. Like, I don't like the idea, like, of tests and that you have to learn lessons. It's more like, can we make it more of a game that I actually have to figure this out before I can kind of go into the next level of awareness? That feels a lot more fun to me. But it's true, right? You'll just keep on seeing, be like, oh, look at this pattern again. This is really interesting. What's it showing me? Again, what's the invitation? I'm being invited into more. Instead of seeing it as contrast, I'm being invited into more. So what am I being invited into?
Yes. And Rebecca, staying on one of your courses and what you are teaching, I saw something very interesting, healing the witch wound. What is all about? It's quite an interesting name.
Oh, so a couple of things to know about me. I was actually born on Halloween. So I identify with that witch analogy anyway, which of course has been branded by other people. People weren't nominating themselves as witches, right? But it's really the persecution wound, which a lot of light healers have felt across the eons. For myself personally, this is getting more esoteric. If your listeners are familiar with the Akashic records and going into past lives, and for me, one of my past lives, I was actually burnt at the stake. For a long time in this 3D reality, I used to have a sensation in my right leg, which felt kind of like bubbles. Like when you drink a can of soda and it's all bubbly. It actually used to feel like that in my leg. And I was like, what is that? Like, I would go skiing and I would actually be like, oh, am I going to break my leg or something? Anyway, started developing my intuition, went and learned about the Akashic records, went into a past life and realized that I'd been burned at the stake. And the bubbly sensation was connected to a soldier stepping forward and breaking my leg with a sword. So I would stop yelling and burn faster. And once I had that awareness, that bubbling sensation left for good, right? And once upon a time, right, I didn't believe in the Akashic records myself. So I was like, whoa. But leaning into these energies and understanding that a lot of people who do light work, and I used to feel this way myself, that I told you I couldn't share what I was doing because I was going to be judged by the people I was working with in the bank, that they would think that I was stupid or frivolous or illogical. So the witch wound is really about the shame that we have experienced often as light workers and liberating yourself from that shame, that where, you know, you were judged for your gifts or you felt that it wasn't safe to truly express who you are. And I know a lot of my clients go through this in one of my programs, Intuitive Mastery. It's a longer program, but we look at this aspect because it's all about allowing yourself to be your true self, right? But again, it's really that concept of, are people going to judge me? Are they going to criticize me? Are they going to actually physically hurt me if I am my true self? A lot of people have had past lives where they have been an advocate for the divine and they have been persecuted for it. As a healer, as a light worker, branded as a witch. So the witch wound is really about shifting the energy of that. It's very good for people who feel they're still having some hiding, right? Which is shame-based, which is really about, no, you're not this experience. You're not other people's opinions. And it's time to take your power back so you can truly express yourself in this lifetime.
Yes,
Yeah.
very, very interesting. And do you set up a specific ceremony, or is just going with the client in their Akashic records and trying to acknowledge and switch that experience?
The witch wound is actually a recording of one I did as a group previously on my website. That's a recording that was done a while ago, but it's really about the helping shift those frequencies of shame. So I guide people through a process to do that. When I'm working with people one-on-one, yes, going into the Akashic records for the purpose of shifting any shame can be hugely beneficial. Because of course, shame being the lowest frequency, it's the energy of I am wrong, which a lot of people are carrying. Guilt, of course, being I've done something wrong, but that's why they usually hang out together. But naturally, when you shift those, it's often like a cork in a bucket of water, right? You shift the shame and people just go woof. The cork comes to the surface. They're like, they feel so much more expanded. Excuse me. And of course, shame is universal. So if you're not, and again, it's probably the only thing really that I think is worth witnessing in yourself, because shame is one of those things that when you witness it, it is so transformative. And witnessing it not just in yourself, in the presence of others. In group containers, when I'm witnessing shame, it is so transformative for people because they'll say their worst fear in regards to what they feel the most ashamed of. And then other people will be like, oh, that's nothing, right? Right? Because they'll say, this is what my experiences was, right? Which is so transformative because people are like, you know, you're still loved in spite of these experiences. And also, they're an experience. They're not who you are, but it can definitely contract your energetic flow. We want to keep ourselves expanded, of course.
Yes, there are so many social constructs that keep us small and bottle up and afraid to, as we discussed, experience, express our true self. And in a different interview, I talked to a guest about the inner child, and we're talking about bringing that inner child to the surface. And even if it takes you to go to a forest and yell as much as possible, that's an expression of relief and bringing that aspect of the inner child forward, even for a short period of time, but that you can keep exploring this type of expression.
Yes. And also, too, one thing about child energy is remembering that we are innocent, right? Because when we know ourselves as innocent, there's no guilt.
Yes.
So I was really fortunate too. When I was young, I had my best friend was a little boy called Richard, and we had the best fun together, like about 4 or 5 years old. We had all the adventures. So, but you know, that fun, that joy, that playfulness, just the curiosity, the awe, the wonder, we get to live like that as adults when we're willing to live from the soul and not from the mind. And again, it is so important often too. Like I've worked with a lot of people who have experienced a lot of trauma. And again, it's about the relationship you're having, not even with the event, with the trauma, like the part, you know, what's left inside of you. That's what needs to be taken care of. That's what needs to be witnessed and loved and then just transmuted because it's not here anymore. So often that's the worst thing about something that's traumatic is it's not actually the event, it's what you make it mean. And that again comes from the mind. So I know a lot of people would say, swear black and blue, that it can take a long time to heal trauma. But the invitation there is to what does it take to know yourself as the person who experienced it and observed it, but that's not you. Right? Again, and this is why we can shift. When we're willing to shift into soul self, we don't even have to do the healing work because we're just knowing ourselves as healed, whole, and complete. And I think for a lot of people, that's quite a revolution. And I know that it's completely valid depending on where you're at. You know, if you're coming from the level of mind and you're frightened, it can be completely appropriate to do those things until you're at a point where you're ready to leave your mind and go and live from the soul permanently. I had an experience, Claudio, where when I was in London, this is when I was like in my early 20s, and I was very, very unhappy. I'd just broken up with a guy who was the love of my life. I adored him. I had moved from the Estates to London and I was miserable. I bumped into a friend of mine that I went to school with here. I think it was on Oxford Street. What are the chances of that happening? Completely different country. Hadn't seen her for 5 years. She opens up her diary. It says, write to Becky in the back of her diary. Anyway, she takes me to church, which I was completely against at the time. Her husband's the pastor. They're saying, stand up and receive Christ. I'm rolling my eyes, like in total resistance about it. But I'm there with my friend. It's her husband, right? So I stand up. He comes over. He puts his hand on my head. And the next thing I know, I'm on the ground, completely humbled, but also like I call it being zapped, and putting it into words actually minimizes the experience. But what I knew from that moment is this physical body is not the truth of who we are. The universe was limiting itself in order to zap me, because if it had zapped me completely, I would have just disintegrated. It was so powerful. But I feel like the universe did that to show me that I was so hard-headed. That is like a walnut, man, like a walnut that it's like, how do you get into this woman, right? So having this experience of being like, this is the truth. So stop adhering to all these labels and judgments and the mind and remember the truth of who you are. And it's been my mission ever since then to feel those frequencies in my body, but also to help other people to step into the beauty of that. I don't think there's anything more courageous or admirable than having the courage to know yourself truly. It's a very
Yes.
beautiful thing.
Yeah, and most of us are still stuck into the concept of seeing to believe it instead of embracing the quantum manifestation protocols, which is feel it to manifest it. So it's still a long way to go, but we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even be it, right? The invitation just to be. Like if you are just being the truth of who you are being abundance. And I get it because a lot of people are like, I'm here and what I want is over there, because they're looking at their external reality and making that real and going, I have to do all these things in order to get there. which of course creates that separation and that constant, oh, I've got to get to the next thing, I've got to get to the next thing. Whereas if you know yourself, you collapse that paradigm completely and you shift into operating from different frequency, which means it's going to be easier to create anyway. I get it. I know it's a process. I definitely didn't get here overnight, right? It has been a journey.
Yes.
But it's been an amazing one.
Rebecca, at the beginning, I mentioned that you live in New Zealand, a place of like a beautiful place with amazing energies. Can you share if one of your experiences, if you felt anything magical by going to any energy portals in New Zealand or anything similar?
There's a portal at Castle Hill, which is, oh, how far is it from Christchurch? An hour maybe. So that's quite well known in terms of people visiting that place. But one thing about New Zealand, and you know, when you travel and you feel the energy of different countries, one thing about New Zealand is it's very young. Like I think we are not even 250 years old. So our energy is very new and green and very pure, right? Like we have beautiful drinking water here in New Zealand. Like it's a shock as a Kiwi to go overseas and drink out of the tap and be like, oh my God, this tastes disgusting, right? And again, not disparaging anybody, but we're very fortunate that we have the energy of a lot of purity. You know, I actually think I reshared it on TikTok the other day, like a woman who was taking a train trip through New Zealand. And I know it because I live here. But you know how when you see something through somebody else's eyes and you're just like, whoa. And she was like, oh my God, New Zealand is so beautiful. And it is, right? We have a lot of pure, clear energy. Myself, I'm actually looking out towards the ocean. I live in Christchurch next to the beach. I'm a Scorpio, of course, I'm a water baby in the respect of the emotion. Why I chose to live here is because the view is so expansive. Like it literally looks like you're looking over the edge of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're very, very fortunate. Beautiful frequency in that respect. And we have attracted a lot of overseas people who live here now, like James Cameron lives in Wellington, and is it Derek Sivers? I think that's how you pronounce his name, the guy who created CD Baby. He lives in Wellington too. I think Shania Twain owns property here because it is clear, pure frequency. So I'm very grateful to live here. Got a lot of history here myself. I'm actually a fifth generation New Zealander. I have Scottish ancestry. So yeah, it's a privilege to live here. I'm very grateful for my adventurous ancestors for jumping on a boat all those years ago and coming here. It's a great place to live.
Nice, very nice. Rebecca, what will you consider a fulfilled life?
Knowing yourself, for sure. Because you are love frequency. And what people want is to experience that. It's not even like a feeling, because a feeling is like a cloud, right? It can come and it can go. You want to know it as a state of being. And that is always the invitation from spirit. Like I have it on my fridge and it just says, forget everything but love, because that's who you are, right? Like it just says, forget everything but love, because instantly that takes you to the correct focus. Instantly that takes you to the truth of who you are. And that's what we want as light workers, to embody more truth and to be the frequency of that. So for me, like a fulfilled life is really knowing who you are. I think that is such a massive pursuit for every human. Like all of us have asked that question, who am I? You are love in a body, but experiencing that is the deepest desire.
Nice, thank you. What are your plans for 2024? Any new programs, traveling, any new experiences?
Yeah, for me personally, I'm going to visit friends in Sydney in February. I'm going to go to the States later in September. And this year I have, I'm always running programs, but I really got to that point where I have like three main ones. which is power and profit, which is really about being a conscious creator, elegant wealth, which is embodying those wealth frequencies inside of yourself, being abundance, and intuitive mastery, which is a deeper, longer term program, really about you getting to know you and how you are relating to yourself. Are you doing it from a place of power and compassion? Or, you know, I worked with before with a lot of people who don't even realize that they're limiting themselves or they're beating themselves up subconsciously, because maybe it's not in their thought process every day, but they're not allowing themselves to just release themselves from the suffering, which is totally available to you. And ironically, I know it's hard for the brain to comprehend, but it is available instantaneously. So that's always the invitation to help people to step into. You did not come here to suffer. You came here to know yourself. And when you know yourself, to create from that space. Because when you're creating from your soul, that's when your soul sings, right? That's that true form of self-expression. And that's when we feel deeply, deeply fulfilled as a byproduct of who we're being. So more of that, for me, it's really about leaning back more, allowing myself to trust my intuition more, allowing myself to know myself more, and to have opportunities to speak to amazing people like you who are spreading light throughout, humanity, which is fantastic, and to really be a person who's contributing to that.
Thank you. Beautiful. And as we are approaching the end of the interview, any final thoughts?
I think one thing that comes to mind immediately is be kind to yourself as you are journeying deeper into the truth of who you are. It can be so easy, and it can be such a habit for people to always be going, I'm here and I need to be there. I'm here and I need to be there. And they do this in regards to relationships, which puts expectations on it and pressure. In regards to money, right? Feeling like you're not good enough because you haven't created what you want yet. Your spirituality, thinking it should look different. The mind's always going to convince you too that there's another thing to do. You collapse that paradigm completely when you come back to the truth of who you are. But be kind to yourself as you go deeper into the truth of who you are. Kindness is everything, right? At the end of the day, it's all that matters. Were you kind to yourself and to others? And again, through law of correspondence, as within, so without. People love it, right? Like you can literally save somebody's life just by being kind to them.
Yes.
That's a good thing.
Thank you very much. Lovely conversation. And thank you for finding the time for all of us today, and all the best with your endeavors.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. And to my viewers, please visit the website, claudiumurgan.com, spiritualinspired.ca. Again, share this video, like it, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And until next time, love and gratitude.